evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The federal government has until the end of this month to make a decision on a massive proposed oil sands mine in northern Alberta. All Indigenous communities in the area signed benefit agreements for the mine, but one First Nation says the province has failed to meet its demands when it comes to environmental concerns. Tamara Pimentel has that story.
This is where the proposed Teck Frontier mine will be built if it gets approved by the federal government. It's located in Wood Buffalo National Park, north of Fort McMurray in northern Alberta. It has approval of the 14 Indigenous communities in the surrounding area. But Chief Alan Adam of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation says the province has been negligent in its willingness to discuss environmental measures. And that might complicate Ottawa's review of the project.
The province did not fulfill the requirements that were set out in regards to dealing with us under our agreement that we put in place with Teck. We have a mitigation table with the federal government, which is just about complete. And we had a mitigation table with the province of Alberta, which they failed to even any kind of discussions.
Adam says while Teck and Canada dealt with his community in good faith, only 4 meetings took place with the province to discuss sensitive issues that involve the protection of woodland caribou and bison in the area. But Jess Sinclair of Alberta Environment and Parks says the province has engaged in extensive discussions with the First Nation. In an email to APTN, she wrote, "We continue to engage constructively and have several offers of ways to enhance the existing environmental management system in place in the region." The mine is promised to provide thousands of new jobs and $70 billion in revenues to the Canadian government. It's expected to produce about 260,000 barrels of bitumen a day. Adams' community also signed on for the project, but he says he wasn't given much of a choice.
We had no choice to go on with this, and we were the only last nation that didn't have an agreement with Teck Resources. It's not like we wanted to pursue this, but we were put in a position of do or die situation, and we had to do it.
A decision to whether or not the project will be approved will happen by the end of February. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Fairview.
After 13 years, Lac Seul First Nation in northwestern Ontario finally has access to clean drinking water. On Thursday, Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller visited Kejik Bay to celebrate the grand opening of a new water treatment plant. The Chief and Council said they'll now be able to build more houses for their growing community.
We don't have to worry about if the power goes off, we'll have no water, or if we have scheduled power outages. We don't have to worry about us having to fill our bathtubs just so we can flush our toilets or, cook supper. Right now, this plant has a lifespan of 25 years and should accommodate the growth in those 25 years.
Now to Tyendinaga. Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller is set to meet with rail demonstrators, but the time and place has yet to be confirmed. In the meantime, Mohawk land defenders say they are staying put. Jamie Pashigumskum has this.
At the moment, there's a meeting of chiefs going on at the community centre in Tyendinaga. But here on the scene, the day has been pretty uneventful. The only exception was that the OPP, for the first time in days, have approached the land protectors at the tracks. Now, this was a OPP liaison team, and their purposes were strictly for public safety reasons. As yesterday, the land protectors are not granting interviews, but APTN was granted access into their camp and the one here in the east. And the sentiment growing there is that, yes, they are here in support of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, and their demands remain the same, that the RCMP get off Wet'suwet'en land. One of the land protectors I spoke with said they're here for Indigenous people across the country, but they're also here for themselves. Now, he referred to the Oka crisis of the 1990s, and he said that some of those guys were there. And in 30 years, not much has changed. So that's what they're doing here. They're here to evoke change, not only for them, but the future, and for the future of their children. Jamie Pashigumskum, APTN National News, Tyendinaga.
Nathan Cullen is a former MP for part of northern British Columbia. Cullen represented Skeena Bulkley Valley that includes the Wet'suwet'en Traditional Territory. He joins us from his home in Smithers, BC. Mr. Cullen, thanks for joining us. You were appointed to act as a provincial liaison with the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs in the Coastal GasLink dispute. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, out of respect for the parties that were there, the province of British Columbia and the Wet'suwet'en, I can't talk about the discussion actually at the table. I can talk about some of the things that have been made public since. We were unable in those days of talks to find a way out of the impasse. We were trying to avoid police enforcement of the court order, of the injunction of protesters blocking the CGL pipeline. We were able to achieve some other things in terms of the relationship between the minister and the chiefs, which may be starting to bear some fruit because ultimately this dispute won't be solved at protest. It'll be solved ultimately at a negotiating table of some kind. It seems like that table may be forming up again as the effects of this conflict have spread far beyond Wet'suwet'en territory throughout British Columbia and Canada. So the talks were unsuccessful in their larger goal, but maybe made the foundations for something that the province and the Wet'suwet'en can work on right now in solving that greater conflict.
We understand the 20 First Nations along the route that signed pipeline benefit agreements with CGL are unable to speak out. What do you know about that?
Yeah, typically in these agreements with band councils, the company or the province, depending on who's doing the negotiating, also include what we refer to as a non-disclosure clause. That means once signed, the band council can't talk about it. The agreements are also often portrayed as being those band councils in support of the project itself. Sometimes that's true. Oftentimes, though, there is an understanding at the table that the band council or the nation might be opposed to a particular project, a mine or a pipeline, yet the company and the province will say, well, it's good, responsible government to negotiate any kind of benefits, regardless of your opposition, in case the project goes ahead. That's local jobs or revenue. Then those agreements, unfortunately, get portrayed out in the public by some as being those nations on side. Therefore, there's a division between the elected folks and the hereditary. And I think in this story, there's been a lot of misconceptions for sure in terms of how things work in Wet'suwet'en country. This one, though, I think more broadly applies to a lot of things that we see across Canada when the government or an industry is trying to make agreements with a band council as opposed to the hereditary leadership.
So under Canadian rule of law, the ability of Indian Act band councils to approve pipelines is questionable. How do the governments and CGL come to grips with that?
Well, I think having negotiations with the band council, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that from my perspective. Where the challenge becomes is if the government or a corporation sees that band council being able to make decisions on what happens across the land base. And where there is an hereditary government, which there is here in Wet'suwet'en country where I live, in Gidimt'en country, the hereditary system still exists. Now, how to reconcile these two forms of government, the Indian Act band councils, along with an hereditary government, is something that of work within the Wet'suwet'en. Sometimes in the past, governments or industry have tried to pit one against the other, the so-called divide and conquer strategy. Ultimately, my hope is, and I think it's the hope of many, is that not only will that issue get reconciled, but how the Crown, province of BC and Canada, respect and acknowledge the hereditary leadership here with the Wet'suwet'en, who, of course, proved that ownership, that deed entitled to land at the Supreme Court of Canada back in 1997.
Mr. Cullen, we'll have to leave it there, but again, appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
Not a bit, anytime.
Conservative leader Andrew Scheer addressed the growing civil disobedience today. At a press conference in the House, he demanded the Liberal government get the RCMP to enforce the law. Scheer said the government can't let blockaders run roughshod over the rule of law. He said the economy is being held hostage, and that this is a warm-up fight to shutting down Canada's entire energy sector. Scheer suggested a relatively small group is responsible.
We have ideologically motivated protesters and activists who have, in many cases, have no connection at all with the First Nations community. And they are threatening the jobs of thousands. We're hearing from the union representing railway workers that up to 6,000 railway workers could face layoffs. Okay, these protesters, these activists, may have the luxury of spending days at a time on a blockade, but they need to check their privilege. They need to check their privilege and let people whose job depends on the railway system and small business, farmers, do their jobs.
Well, time for a quick break, and then we'll take you to some of the memorial marches being held today. Here's a look at Saturday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. -8 with sunny skies for Fredericton and Charlottetown. 21 below for Nain, 16 below with snow for Inukjuak, -4 in Montreal, 7 below with snow for Val-d'Or in Chibougamau, -1 in Toronto under sunny skies, partly cloudy and 4 below for Ottawa, -4 with snow in Thunder Bay and Kapuskasing, -8 for Sioux Lookout, 28 below in Churchill, -19 with snow for Norway House and God's Lake, flurries and 8 below in Winnipeg, snow and -10 in Brandon, -16 under sunny skies for Saskatoon, 11 below with snow in Regina, -20 in Buffalo Narrows, 19 below in La Ronge. Welcome back. The 29th annual Murdered and Missing Women and Girls rally was held today in Vancouver. The march is held on Valentine's Day to honor the memory of all women from the downtown east side who have died or gone missing. APTN's Tina House was there.
Here on the corner of Main and Hastings, preparations are underway to start the annual Murdered and Missing Women and Girls March. This is the 29th year, and this year it's called The Spirit Lives Within You. And then it began, with thousands of people walking through the downtown east side for another somber walk to honor murdered and missing women and girls. Many of them were either found murdered here or were last seen in this area. Everett Tom and his family and friends are here to remember his stepdaughter, Lacey Marvina. She went missing on November the 3rd, 2017.
The night she went missing was, it was -13 out, and me and her mom, Sonia, because she was homeless, she didn't want to come home with us because we have her daughter living with us, our granddaughter, and she didn't want to jeopardize that with ministry to have her come to our home.
Her body was found a few days after that in the river, and there are still no answers as to what happened to her.
They closed the case basically after they found her, and they haven't done anything more. One thing I'd like to say is that in Lillooet territory that we have a tribal police and we also have a RCMP. We need them to share information back and forth between each other.
Organizers are saying that this is one of the largest crowds they've ever seen. Many came to support, and others came here to remember lost loved ones, like Ange McDougall. She's been coming every year.
This is a very important gathering for us as we seek justice. But we also want to understand the systemic problems that contribute to violence against women more generally, but certainly against violence against Indigenous women. And so this march is about honoring those women that have passed, those women that are missing, and the families, and of course this community and communities like this all across Canada.
Since the conclusion of the national inquiry, have you seen any of those recommendations actually come into play in the communities?
No. I have not seen any of the recommendations come into play, but that's the work that we have to do. We can never expect government to really take these things seriously.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
What an amazing turnout there in Vancouver. For the 10th straight year, Ottawa had its own Valentine's Day rally, and this year's event had a theme. Because 8 months ago, the MMIWG inquiry report was released across the river in Gatineau. An official federal response is still forthcoming. So as Todd Lamoran reports, opinions were colder than the weather.
Sub-zero temperatures didn't deter the 50 people who showed up to support Lori Ojik. She said the government needs to be held to account.
Because there's no help out there for families like us. There's none. I mean, yes, we have vigils and everything, but we need stronger support. And
Ojik's daughter, Maisie, and her friend Shannon Alexander went missing in 2008. She testified before the MMIWG inquiry and says she's disappointed nothing's been done since the report was released last June.
You know what? I honestly believe the government just wanted a good tap on the back, to say that they did something for our families, when in actual reality, it's nothing. It brought us, again, sharing our stories and going through that trauma over and over again. And we do it because we want to be heard.
Francine Joe is a former Native Women's Association president. She helped organize this rally. She wonders when the government will respond to the report's 231 calls for justice.
It's been far too long. We've had the election. There's minimal promises made, and really we're tired of the promises. I'm still meeting up with families across the country who are disappointed and they want to see action.
Ojik would settle for just one of those calls fulfilled.
And support, in terms of mental health and something that the families don't have, and we don't have that.
Joe vows not to let those calls and the report itself sit on a shelf and gather dust.
No, we need to continue bringing this report up. If the government funded this report, they need to stand behind this report, and that's going to take money and programs and Indigenous collaboration. And if we have to come back here in a few months, I'm sure that these people will come back here in a few months.
Ojik is left wondering if revisiting her trauma was worth it.
Our families' pictures were out there. We raised awareness for our families, and I think that's a good thing. It's always a good thing because it's what we want to do. But if it doesn't go through, it'll be a great disappointment, of course.
Crown Indigenous Relations said in a statement it's still working on an action plan with stakeholders. In the meantime, it points to things like Bill C-92, child welfare reform legislation, as fulfilling a call to justice. Todd Lamarand, APTN National News, Ottawa.
An all-new episode of APTN Investigates airs right here after the news. We'll speak with the reporter after the break. Here's a look at the rest of Saturday's weather forecast. Piggyback up in northern Alberta. -3 with snow in Grand Prairie. 19 below for high level. +3 under sunny skies in Medicine Hat. 1 degree warmer in Calgary. Showers and 9 above in Vancouver and Victoria. -21 with snow for Fort Nelson. +2 and flurries in Smithers. -37 for Old Crow. 36 below in Dawson. 26 below for Yellowknife, -27 in Wrigley and Norman Wells. 35 below for Tuktoyaktuk, -32 in Paulatuck. 33 below for Repulse Bay, Chesterfield and Whale Cove. -29 with snow for Resolute, -33 in Igloolik. Welcome back. Saugeen Ojibwe Nation near the Bruce Peninsula on Lake Huron just voted no to a proposed deep geological repository for nuclear waste. And now they're being asked to consider another one. That's part of the story on APTN Investigates tonight. And reporter Christopher Reed is here to give us a preview. Christopher, thanks for joining us here. Why is another deep geological repository for nuclear waste being pushed at Saugeen Ojibwe Nation?
Well, the one that they just had a community referendum on was proposed by Ontario Power Generation. OPG wanted to put in a DGR at their Bruce Power facility. It was for low and intermediate level waste. But of course, SON or Saugeen Ojibwe Nation voted no on that. But Son is near the municipality of South Bruce, and that is one of the areas that the Nuclear Waste Management Organization is looking at as a possible site for a DGR they want to construct. So just to remind people, the NWMO, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, this is a not-for-profit corporation that was created by an act of Parliament. They are basically funded by nuclear industry players in Canada. NWMO's purpose is to figure out what to do with Canada's used nuclear fuel. Their plan right now that they're pitching is to put used nuclear fuel in a DGR out there in the Canadian Shield and then seal it up for 1 million years.
So you went on a nuclear tour around Ontario to bring us this story. Where else were you going to visit in part 2 here?
Well, the NWMO is looking at 2 locations now, South Bruce, near the Bruce Peninsula, and the township of Ignace, which is about 250 kilometers northwest of Thunder Bay. So we went to the Ignace area. Out there, the NWMO is doing what they call drilling boreholes, and this is to figure out whether the bedrock underneath is good for, putting in a $23.6 billion underground facility. We spoke to the mayor there, Donald Cunningham, and he is basically of the mind that this could turn things around for his community. This is an area that's had a 30-year or more decline, economically speaking. We also spoke to some Indigenous people in the area. They are, we went up to the Ojibwe Nation of Seguin, which is a different Seguin from the other one we were talking about. Yep. They're concerned about their chief and council not keeping them up to date on what is going on with the NWMO. We also went to the other Seguin, of course, at Bruce Peninsula. We talked to them about their referendum they were about to have. And we went to a place where they have the nuclear waste, which is the Western Waste Management Facility. And we got to see these great white containers that they have in this warehouse with used nuclear fuel sitting in it.
Well, Christopher, this is a story I covered for a long time myself. I'm really looking forward to part 2. Thanks for taking some time with us.
Thank you.
And Christopher Reid's Nuclear Courtship Part 2 airs tonight on APTN Investigates right here after the national news. The Canadian Football League's Edmonton Eskimos say they have decided to keep their name as is. The team's name has been criticized as insensitive to Indigenous peoples. The Eskimos said they have met with leaders in many northern communities and also paid for an independent firm to conduct research on the issue. The team say the results they received showed they did not need to change the name. The team also said they will not be releasing those results. The Eskimos also said they hope to continue building the relationship with the Inuit community.
The results of the report were, firstly, we heard a consistent message that Inuit communities wanted more engagement with the club. And the second message was with respect to the name, that there was really no consensus to support a name change.
And just some late-breaking news here. The Indigenous Services Minister, Mark Miller, will be meeting in Tyendinaga with those people holding the blockade there tomorrow morning on the tracks at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And that is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Friday. For the very latest, keep an eye on our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Stick around for APTN Investigates. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend.